This morning, as we come to the Lord's Supper, I want to talk about pressure. That's the name of this short devotion here. Pressure. Have you ever had something hang over your head for a very long time? Or at least it seemed that way. It may have been a project that needed to be done and felt like you would just never finish, or your wife thought you would never finish. Or maybe it was a deadline that had to be met, whether you had the time to work on it or not. I think part of that pressure comes from the fact that deep down we know that our time really doesn't belong to us. As much as we like to pretend otherwise, we know that we're not in control. And deadlines remind us of that all the time, because there's something that you must do. Jesus knows how pressure feels. From the time he set foot here on earth, his every step was leading to the cross. And as soon as he was able, he was about his Father's business. We know this from Luke 2. When Joseph and Mary had to go looking for him, and they found him in the temple about his Father's business. Jesus had urgency. No time was wasted because he had 3 years to finish what he'd been given to do. The last verse in John says this: Jesus did many other things as well. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world will not have room for the books that would be written. This is John 21:25. As early as John 3, verses 14 and 15, Jesus taught Nicodemus that he was headed for the cross so that believers could have eternal life. Nicodemus and Jesus' disciples didn't quite understand what he was saying at the time. But we can see that the cross was always on Jesus' mind, and it was there waiting for him, and he was building to that. It had to be very draining, even from the beginning. When Satan tempted Jesus in the desert in Matthew 4, I'm sure that temptation was quite real. Otherwise, the New Testament writers would have used a different word, like annoyed, instead of temptation. He could have gone the other way and avoided the cross, the physical pain, the spiritual pain of bearing sin, and left us without salvation. Our tendency as human beings is to avoid pain, pressure, and stress. And Jesus simply just could not do that. He had another job to do. Now, as an aside to all this, I believe the physical pain on the cross for Jesus was secondary. And here's my reasoning. Anyone in this room who's a parent would go through any physical pain that was required to save their child and do it without hesitation. You could go to the cross if you had to. In fact, many in Jesus' time did go to the cross. And I think we sometimes forget that. They went there for punishment, but they endured the cross. But the weight of all sin for all time had to be the biggest burden for him that day. Those sweat drops of blood were a physical response to the stress and pressure on the night he was betrayed. That's how much pressure he was under. And if you talk to an emergency room doctor, he will tell you that that is real. The biggest pain for Jesus was because of sin. And he had to do it alone because no one else was worthy. But he loves the Father, and he loves us. He pushed ahead. He got the job done. He made it clear. He made it clear that the Messiah had indeed come. He started his apostles on the way to changing the world. He bowed his head, and he carried the burden of sin that no one else could. The pressure finally subsided when Jesus powerfully and humbly stated, "It is finished."